Hey guys, welcome back to another late-night journey through human history. The kind that makes you question everything while somehow also putting you to sleep. So go ahead and dim the lights, get cozy, maybe grab a cup of tea or, stare into the soft void of your ceiling fan. Because tonight we're drifting into one of the strangest contradictions in human history. It's a story about genius and destruction, science and sorrow, victory and regret. Yeah, we're talking about the atomic bomb. Or, more precisely, how humanity decided to split an atom, end a world war, and start a new kind of fear, all before breakfast. Now, this isn't going to be an action-packed military documentary with shouting generals or fast cuts of explosions. Nope. We're going slow. We're going to float from the quiet laboratories of theoretical physicists to the humid morning air over Hiroshima. And by the end, you'll probably understand why half of these scientists later regretted everything. So let's drift back to the 1930s, a time when the world hadn't yet realized that it could vaporize itself, the seed of the bomb. Picture Europe in the late 1930s. Everyone's pretending not to notice that Germany's rearming, fascism's trending, and science is quietly having a nervous breakdown. In tiny laboratories across Europe, a few physicists are discovering that atoms, those tiny little invisible specks, can actually be broken. And when you break one, it releases a lot of energy. Like, oops, I just made a sun in my beaker levels of energy. The credit for this discovery is messy, because physicists are like cats. They hate sharing. But in 1938, a couple of German scientists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, accidentally discovered nuclear fission while trying to create something entirely different. They split uranium atoms and, surprise, it released an absurd amount of power. Enter Lise Meitner, the real genius behind the curtain. She was an Austrian Jewish physicist who, at this point, had to flee Nazi Germany because being brilliant and Jewish wasn't exactly fashionable there. From exile, she helped interpret the data and realized, oh, they've just made a new way to end civilization. Of course, no one said it like that, but that was the general idea. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a man named Albert Einstein, yes, that Einstein, was living quietly in America, trying very hard not to get involved in anything political. Unfortunately for him, his old colleague Leo Szilard decided that Einstein's signature might just save the world, or destroy it, depending on how you look at it. Szilard convinced Einstein to sign a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt in 1939, warning that Germany might be building a bomb using this new atomic power. Einstein reluctantly agreed, probably muttering something like, "This seems like a bad idea, but fine." And thus, the Manhattan Project was born. The Manhattan Project. Science meets panic. Now, the Manhattan Project sounds very sleek and sophisticated, but really, it was just a bunch of geniuses with terrible social skills hiding in the desert trying to make science work before the Nazis did. The U.S. poured unimaginable amounts of manpower and money into the project, over 130,000 people, many of whom didn't even know what they were working on. The goal, build an atomic bomb before Germany could. At the head of this chaotic, caffeine-fueled operation was J.R. Robert Oppenheimer, a man so poetic and melancholy he could have been the main character in a French art film. He was a theoretical physicist with a flair for quoting Hindu scripture and a general lack of sleep. The military probably picked him because he was both brilliant and slightly terrifying, in that quiet intellectual about to change the world way. The project set up shop in Los Alamos, New Mexico, a lovely, isolated desert spot perfect for secrets and mild existential dread. Scientists from all over the world arrived, many of them refugees from Europe, still haunted by the rise of fascism. They were told they were building something important, and oh, it was. The Manhattan Project was so secret that even Vice President Truman didn't know about it until he became president. Imagine being the guy who suddenly finds out, "Oh, by the way, we've been building a sun in a box." What do you do? The science of oblivion. The basic idea of the atomic bomb is weirdly simple. You take uranium or a plutonium, you smush it together until it becomes critical, and it releases an enormous explosion. Sounds straightforward. It's not. Because if you smush it too slowly, it fizzles out. Too fast, and it blows up in your face. And no one really wanted to find out the hard way. The Los Alamos scientists built two bomb designs. Little Boy, which used uranium. Fat Man, which used plutonium. They were adorable nicknames for world-ending devices because dark humor is the only way scientists stay sane. Little Boy was the simpler one, a gun-type bomb that basically fired one piece of uranium into another to start the chain reaction. Fat Man, on the other hand, used implosion, surrounding a core of plutonium with explosives that squeezed it into critical mass. It was more complicated, but also more efficient, like the iPhone of bombs if the iPhone could vaporize cities. Testing was an experience. On July 16, 1945, the team gathered in the New Mexico desert for what they called the Trinity test. This was humanity's first nuclear explosion. Oppenheimer watched the fireball rise and famously thought of a line from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." It's probably the most poetic way anyone has ever said, "Oh crap, the world changes overnight." By this point, Germany had already surrendered. Hitler was dead. But Japan was still fighting. The Pacific War had become a grim, drawn-out nightmare. The Allies had taken island after island, and Japan refused to surrender. U.S. strategists estimated that invading Japan would cost up to 1 million American lives, not to mention millions of Japanese civilians. So the question became, how do you end a war when your enemy refuses to quit? Truman, who had become president just a few months earlier, faced the ultimate decision. He was new to the job. He hadn't even known the atomic bomb existed when he took office. And now he was told, "We have a new weapon. It can end the war instantly." Imagine that for a moment. You've just become president, and someone tells you they've built a machine that can erase cities. What do you do? Truman authorized it, the morning of August 5, 1945. It's early morning in Hiroshima. It's a normal, humid, sleepy Monday. People are making breakfast, heading to work, and trying not to think about the endless air raids that had hit other Japanese cities. Hiroshima had been mostly spared so far. No one quite knew why, though many suspected something strange. Some thought it was because there were many shrines and schools. Others believed the Americans were saving it for something special. They weren't wrong. At 8:15 a.m., a U.S. B-29 bomber named Enola Gay, yes, that was its actual name, dropped a single bomb called Little Boy. It fell silently for about 43 seconds. Then, the world ended. A blinding flash, brighter than the sun, engulfed the city. Temperatures reached over 4,000 degrees Celsius. Concrete buildings evaporated. People were turned to shadows on the walls. Within seconds, nearly 70,000 people were dead. Tens of thousands more would die in the following weeks from burns and radiation. The explosion flattened everything within 2 kilometers. And then came the silence. A silence so total, survivors later described it as like the end of the world. And in a way, it was. The Japanese government didn't even know what had happened at first. Communication was cut off. Military officials thought Hiroshima had been hit with a new kind of incendiary bomb. No one could comprehend that an entire city had been wiped off the map by one device. At Washington, the news arrived with a strange mix of triumph and unease. Truman announced to the world that the U.S. had dropped a new kind of bomb, one more powerful than 20,000 tons of TNT. He claimed it had been used to shorten the war and save lives, which technically it did.